My name is Amelia, and at 28, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. After working 2 jobs through college just to survive. This weekend was supposed to be my victory lap. I had finally saved enough for a down payment on my own place, a condo I earned with my own blood, sweat, and tears. But instead of celebrating, I found myself standing in the shadows of my childhood home, listening to my father utter the 9 words that would shatter my world. Don't worry, we'll make your sister pay for everything. Everything. The word echoed in the silence, a cold, hard confirmation of a lifetime of unfairness. But what they didn't know was that I had a plan of my own. If you've ever felt like an ATM instead of a daughter, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button, because you're not going to believe what happened next. The summer after graduation, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a beat-up Honda Civic and moved to New York City. I had landed a junior analyst position at a respected financial firm, a job I clawed my way into after hundreds of applications and a dozen grueling interviews. My first apartment was a tiny shoebox in Queens with a roommate I found on Craigslist. The rent was insane, but for the first time in my life, I had a space that was truly mine. A space where no one could tell me I wasn't working hard enough. My family, of course, saw it differently. When I told them the news, my father's only comment was a skeptical grunt. New York, huh? Hope you know what you're doing. That city chews people up and spits them out. My mother was more concerned about appearances. Are you sure it's a safe neighborhood, dear? It was never about pride, never about celebrating my achievement. It was always about doubt, about a subtle expectation that I would eventually fail and come crawling back. That unspoken belief became the fuel for my fire. I wasn't just going to survive in New York, I was going to conquer it. My life became a blur of spreadsheets, market analyses, and lukewarm coffee drunk at my desk long after the sun had set. While other junior analysts were out at happy hour, I was in the office, volunteering for the projects nobody else wanted. The messy corporate mergers, the tedious forensic accounting cases. I took them all. I arrived an hour before my boss and left long after he did. My colleagues started calling me the bulldog, because once I sank my teeth into a problem, I never ever let go. It wasn't just about ambition, it was about survival. Every paycheck was a validation, a brick in the wall I was building around myself. The calls home became a carefully managed routine. Once a week, on Sunday evenings. The conversations were always the same. 5 minutes of polite questions about my job, which I always answered with a vague, "It's going well, keeping busy." Then, the conversation would inevitably shift to Leo. Leo was thinking about taking a graphic design course. Leo needed a new MacBook for his creative pursuits. Leo had joined a recreational soccer league and scored a goal. My parents would recount these minor events with the kind of breathless excitement they never once showed for my academic or professional milestones. I would listen, make the appropriate encouraging noises, and feel that familiar, dull ache of being invisible. They never asked about the details of my work. They never asked about the pressure, the long hours, the crushing weight of responsibility. In their minds, I had a simple little office job, a 9 to 5 where I pushed papers around. They had no concept of the world I lived in, the high-stakes environment where a single misplaced decimal point could cost millions. And that ignorance, that was my advantage. That was my secret weapon. While they thought I was just getting by, just another cog in the machine, I was quietly building an empire. My first promotion came after 18 months. Senior analyst. My salary jumped. I didn't upgrade my apartment. I didn't buy a new car. I kept living like a broke college student. I ate ramen, I took the subway, and I funneled every spare dollar into a single obsessive mission, paying off my student loans, all $60,000 of them. The day I made the final payment, 2 years and 4 months after starting my job, I didn't tell anyone. There was no celebration. I just sat in my tiny apartment, looking at the zero balance on the screen, and felt a profound sense of quiet liberation. I was finally, truly, free from the one thing they could have ever held over my head. I owed nothing to anyone. With the loans gone, I started a new mission: wealth creation. I opened a brokerage account, a high-yield savings account, and a 401k. I read every book on investing I could get my hands on. I built a 6-month emergency fund. Then I started aggressively investing in low-cost index funds. My life was a machine of disciplined saving. Every bonus, every raise, went straight into my portfolio. A year later, I was promoted again. Project manager. Now I was leading a team, handling multi-million-dollar client accounts. The money was getting serious, and still, I told my family nothing. When my mother asked if I was saving any money, I'd just laugh and say, "Mom, it's New York. You know how it is." They'd nod, satisfied with the image of their struggling daughter in the big city. It was the image they were comfortable with. It maintained the family dynamic they had so carefully constructed. By the time I was 27, I had a net worth of over $150,000, and I used it to buy my silence, my freedom, and my sanctuary. I bought a one-bedroom condo in Brooklyn. The day I signed the mortgage papers, my hand wasn't shaking. It was steady. This wasn't a gift. This wasn't a handout. This was mine, forged in the fire of their neglect. I never sent them pictures of the place. When they asked about it, I described it as a small starter apartment. They had no idea it had floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the skyline. They had no idea it was my fortress, the physical manifestation of my independence. It was a secret I guarded jealously, because I knew, instinctively, that if they ever understood the true scale of my success, they wouldn't see it as something to be proud of. They would see it as a resource to be tapped. And I was right. It was my mother's 55th birthday that finally brought me back to Pennsylvania. For weeks leading up to it, the calls had been different. Usually, my mother would fill the time with neighborhood gossip or complaints about the weather. But lately, her conversations had taken a strange, almost clinical interest in my finances. It started subtly. "How's that little condo of yours, dear? Property values in Brooklyn must be skyrocketing." Then it became more pointed. "Are you thinking of selling anytime soon? I hear the market is just fantastic." It was odd, but I brushed it off as her making awkward small talk. Then my father started. During one of our brief calls, he casually asked, "Hey, out of curiosity, what's your credit score looking like these days? With all this talk about inflation, I'm just interested in how the banks are rating people." I told him it was excellent, somewhere north of 800. He just grunted, "Good, good. That's smart." At the time, I thought he was giving me a rare, clumsy compliment. Looking back, I see it for what it was: reconnaissance. They were probing my defenses, assessing my resources. A cold feeling had started to settle in my gut, a quiet alarm bell ringing in a distant room, but I couldn't quite figure out why. So, against my better judgment, I booked a flight. I told myself it was for my mother. But really, I think I needed to see for myself what was going on. I arrived on a Friday evening with a designer handbag she'd been hinting about for months, elegantly wrapped. The forced smiles and stiff hugs were all too familiar. Dinner was a predictable performance, a showcase for all things Leo. He had apparently decided his new calling was to be a YouTube influencer, focusing on drone videography. I listened, nodded, and pushed lasagna around my plate, the alarm bell in my head now a little louder. After dinner, Leo announced he was going out with friends, and I offered to help my mother with the dishes, a ritual from my childhood that I had always hated. As we were cleaning up, I realized I'd left my portable charger in my travel bag. Knowing my phone would be dead by morning, I went upstairs to get it. On the way, I remembered Leo always had the latest tech gadgets. His room was right there. I figured I'd just pop in and see if I could borrow his. I knocked lightly on his door. No answer. Assuming he had already left, I pushed the door open. And there it was. Sitting on his desk, gleaming under the lamplight, was a brand new DJI Mavic 3 Pro drone. It was still partially in its box, the sleek gray body looking like some kind of futuristic weapon. I knew exactly what it was, and exactly what it cost, because a colleague at my firm had just bought one and had complained about the price for a week straight. It was over $2,000. Next to it, lying carelessly on a stack of magazines, was the receipt from Best Buy. Dated last Tuesday. A feeling like ice water trickled down my spine. $2,000. Just then, my mother appeared in the hallway, carrying a basket of laundry. "Oh, there you are, dear. Looking for something?" I gestured towards the drone, my voice sounding strangely calm. "Just came to see if Leo had a charger I could borrow." Wow, he got himself a serious piece of equipment. My mother's face broke into a wide, proud smile. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me since I won the 4th grade spelling bee. "Oh, that," she beamed. "Your father and I decided to get it for him. A little early birthday present. You know, to help him get his new career off the ground. He needs the right tools to succeed." I stared at her, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening thud. The probing questions, the feigned interest in my finances, the lies. "His career?" I asked, my voice flat. "Mom, this thing costs a fortune. I thought, you guys told me things were tight right now." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. She waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, we're managing, dear. You have to invest in potential. It's important. Your brother just needs that little extra push to find his path. Well, you always had your scholarships and your student loans. You found your own way. We just need to help him find his." You found your own way. The words weren't a compliment. They were a justification, an absolution. They were the reason it was okay to neglect one child to spoil the other. My path was one of struggle and sacrifice, a path I was forced onto. His path was a freshly paved highway, paid for by them, no matter the cost. The unfairness of it all was so immense, so suffocating, it felt like I couldn't breathe. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was just the other one, the one who didn't need things. I mumbled something about my charger being in the car and walked away, my mind reeling. I went to my old room and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, the cheerful floral wallpaper mocking me. The house grew quiet. My parents went to bed, but sleep was impossible. My mind was a chaotic storm of resentment and hurt. Around midnight, thirsty and restless, I decided to go downstairs for a glass of water. I tiptoed down the stairs, careful to avoid the third step that always creaked. As I neared the bottom, I heard the soft click of the front door opening and closing, followed by hushed voices from the direction of the kitchen. Leo was back, and my father was waiting up for him. I froze in the hallway, hidden by the deep shadows cast by the moonlight through the living room window. I should have turned back. I should have gone back to my room and just left in the morning. Some primal instinct screamed at me that I was about to hear something that would change my life forever, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot. "How bad is it?" It was my father's voice, low and strained. There was a heavy sigh from my brother. It's about 40,000 now, Dad. The online poker sites, a couple of credit cards I maxed out. It got away from me. $40,000. The number hung in the air, a monstrous, obscene figure. It was more than half of my entire student loan debt, a debt I had spent years of my life, thousands of hours of grinding work, to pay off. My father muttered a curse under his breath. "Your mother can't know the full amount. She thinks it's half that." I know," Leo whined, his voice taking on that pathetic, wheedling tone he'd used since he was 5 to get out of trouble. "I messed up, Dad. Big time. But I've learned my lesson, I swear." There was a long, tense pause. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And then my father spoke the words that would become the anthem of my freedom. The words that would sever the last frayed thread of hope I ever had for a real family. He said, "Listen to me. Don't worry, we'll make your sister pay for everything." The blow was physical. I felt the air rush out of my lungs, and I had to press my hand against the wall to keep from collapsing. "Amelia?" Leo sounded confused, but not opposed, not even slightly. "She's got that fancy job in New York, that condo," my father continued, his voice now filled with a chilling, strategic confidence. "She's got money, and frankly, she owes this family, after everything we've done for her. We'll tell her we want to start a family business, maybe a franchise opportunity, something that sounds legitimate. We'll get her to take out a business loan in her name. With her credit score and income, she'll get approved for 50, maybe 60 grand. Easy." My stomach churned with nausea. It wasn't just a thought. It was a plan. A cold, calculated, predatory plan. "You think she'll just give us the money?" Leo asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. My father chuckled. A low, ugly sound. "Do not give. Not. Invest. We'll promise her returns. A partnership. Whatever it takes. You know your sister. Always so desperate for our approval. We'll tell her this is her chance to finally be a real part of this family, to contribute something important. That emotional angle. It'll cloud her judgment." Then I heard my mother's footsteps on the stairs. "What are you two whispering about down here?" she asked. "Just going over the plan for Amelia," my father replied calmly. "Oh," my mother said, her voice dropping. There was no surprise, no shock, just complicity. "Well, she has an obligation to help her brother. Family helps family. She's done well for herself. It's time she gave back." And then, the final twist of the knife from my brother. "Leo." He laughed, a genuine, dismissive laugh. "Yeah," he said, his voice suddenly animated. "She'll probably jump at the chance. She's always trying to feel included." That was it. That was the moment everything broke. The hurt, the anger, the years of suppressed resentment, it all coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of clarity. They weren't my family. They were parasites, and I was the host. At this point in the story, I honestly don't have a word for what that feels like. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now, do me a favor. Comment with just one word that describes what this family did. But I didn't shatter. I didn't cry. That rage, it transformed into something else. Something cold. Something powerful. And as I silently crept back up those stairs, back to the room that no longer felt like mine, I wasn't planning my escape. I was planning my war. As I slipped back into my room and closed the door without a sound, something inside me shifted. The part of me that had spent a lifetime craving their approval, the small child who just wanted her parents to be proud. She died in that hallway. There were no tears. Tears felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, a weakness I could no longer permit. What replaced the hurt was a terrifying, crystalline calm. It was the kind of focus that comes only when you realize you are in mortal danger. My danger wasn't physical, it was existential. They were planning to devour my future to feed my brother's failures, and they were going to use my love for them as the bait. That's it, I thought, sitting on the edge of the bed in the pitch dark. That's the end of the line. There will be no next time. They will not change. This is who they are. Wolves. And I had been living in their den my entire life, pretending I was one of the pack. The realization didn't feel sad. It felt clarifying. The fog of hope had finally lifted, and for the first time I could see the landscape clearly. My goal was no longer to win their love. It was to survive their greed. My mind, trained by years in the cutthroat world of finance, immediately switched from emotional response to strategic planning. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a hostile takeover target, and they were planning a leveraged buyout of my life using debt instead of equity. and I was about to execute the most brutal, effective defense strategy they would never see coming. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't confront them. That would be playing their game, a messy, emotional battle I was guaranteed to lose. No, my battlefield was silence. My weapons were logic and the law. I waited. I sat on that bed, listening to the sounds of the house settling. I heard my mother's light footsteps, my father's heavier tread. I heard the flushing of toilets, the closing of doors. Around 2:30 in the morning, I heard my brother stumble in, his clumsy movements a testament to his carefree evening. By 3 a.m., the only sound was the distant drone of my father's snoring. It was time. Moving with a silence I didn't know I possessed, I gathered my few belongings. I folded my clothes with precision, repacked my toiletries, and zipped my suitcase. I left my mother's birthday gift, the expensive handbag, on the dresser. A gift once given is gone. But that would be the last thing they ever got from me. On a piece of hotel stationery from my bag, I wrote a short, sterile note. Work emergency. Had to return to New York immediately. Happy birthday, Mom. No apology. No emotion. Just a clean, professional exit. They would assume I left in the early morning, giving me a crucial head start of several hours. I crept down the stairs, my bare feet finding the silent spots on the old wood. I bypassed the creaky third step without a thought. I slipped out the front door, closing it so gently it didn't even click. My rental car was in the driveway, a small mercy. As I started the engine and pulled away from that house for the final time, I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. I did not check the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there for me. 20 minutes later, I checked into an anonymous airport hotel. The night clerk barely looked up from his phone. The room smelled of disinfectant and faint desperation, but to me, it was a sanctuary. It was my war room. I dropped my bag, opened my laptop, and the campaign began. Phase 1. Secure the assets. I logged into my primary checking account at the bank they knew about, the one I'd had since I was a teenager. I left a few $1,000s in it, just enough to keep it active and avoid suspicion. The rest, a significant 5-figure sum, I transferred to a high-yield savings account at a completely different online bank, one they had never heard of. Click. Done. Phase 2. Fortify the perimeter. My greatest vulnerability was my credit. My excellent score was the key to their entire plan. I had to make it untouchable. I went to the websites for Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, the 3 major credit bureaus. One by one, I placed a full credit freeze on my file. It was a simple process, a few clicks and security questions. This meant no one, not even me, could open a new line of credit in my name without a specific PIN that only I possessed. Their plan to have me take out a loan, or worse, to try and take one out behind my back, was now impossible. Click. Done. Next, I called the 24/7 fraud department for my main credit card. I told the sleepy-sounding agent that I had reason to believe someone was planning to attempt to use my identity fraudulently. I requested that they put an enhanced verbal password on my account. From now on, anyone calling in would have to provide not just my mother's maiden name, but a specific, obscure word only I would know. Click. Done. Phase 3. Assemble the council. I couldn't do this alone. I needed professionals. At 4:30 in the morning, I drafted an email to my financial advisor. The subject line was, Urgent, Security Review of All Accounts. In the body, I was vague, but firm. Hi, Sarah. Due to a sensitive family matter, I need to schedule an emergency call tomorrow to review and implement enhanced security protocols across my entire portfolio. This is time-sensitive. Please let me know your earliest availability. Send. Then I opened a new browser window. I typed in, New York attorney specializing in family financial abuse and asset protection. I spent the next hour reading reviews and partner bios. I found a firm headed by a woman, a former prosecutor who had a reputation for being an absolute shark. I filled out the online contact form, giving a brief, non-emotional summary of the situation, and requested an urgent consultation. Send. By the time the first weak gray light of dawn began to filter through the cheap hotel curtains, I had built a financial fortress around myself. They couldn't touch my money. They couldn't touch my credit. And they had no idea I was even awake. But as I sat there, a new thought began to creep into my mind. They planned to exploit my future. But what if they had already stolen from my past? The thought came out of nowhere, a cold sliver of ice in my gut. I thought about all the times they had claimed to be broke, all the opportunities I had missed, all the things Leo had been given. Was it possible there was more to the story? My work in finance had taught me one thing: always follow the paper trail. Always. I logged into the main website for the local bank my parents had used my whole life, the one where I had my first savings account. I hadn't used this portal in years, but my old login still worked. It was a clunky, outdated interface, a digital attic filled with old records. I started digging through the archived documents section, looking for anything with my name on it. Old checking account statements, an auto loan I'd paid off. It was mostly digital junk. I was about to give up. I was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline. But I decided to do one last search. I typed my full name into the document search bar. A list of PDFs popped up, and near the bottom of the list was a file name that made my heart stop. It read, Amelia College Custodial Trust, Final Statement. A custodial trust. I stared at the words. My parents had told me, repeatedly and emphatically, that they had never been able to save for college for me. That a college fund was a luxury they simply couldn't afford. It had been one of the core truths of my life, the foundation upon which my entire struggle for self-sufficiency was built. And this file name was telling me it was all a lie. My hand was trembling as I clicked the link. A scanned PDF document loaded slowly, line by line. It was an official bank statement, dated 10 years ago. The title at the top was clear: a custodial trust account established for the benefit of Amelia, their daughter. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers. There were the initial deposits, then a decade of steady monthly contributions. Small amounts at first, then larger as my father's career progressed. My eyes jumped to the bottom line. The final balance, before the account was closed. $18,000. The number just floated there on the screen. $18,000. It was a life-changing amount of money for a 17-year-old about to go to college. It would have meant I wouldn't have had to work 2 jobs. It would have meant I could have focused on my studies. It would have meant I wouldn't have graduated with $60,000 of debt. It was the future I was supposed to have. And then I saw it. The final transaction. A single brutal line item. A full withdrawal of the entire balance. I looked at the date next to it, and a white-hot rage, purer and more intense than anything I had ever felt, washed over me. The date was June 12th. It was exactly 2 weeks before my brother, Leo, had left for that 2-week, all-expenses-paid computer camp. The same summer, they told me I had to use my own savings from my grocery store job to pay for my senior class trip. They didn't just fail to help me. They didn't just neglect me. They stole from me. They took the money set aside for my education, for my future, and they handed it to my brother so he could play with computers for 2 weeks. It wasn't a sudden act of desperation to pay off a gambling debt. This was a pattern, a long calculated history of financial and emotional betrayal. The drone, the $40,000 debt, that was just the latest chapter in a story that had been written long before I even knew I was a character in it. Any lingering shred of doubt, any microscopic feeling of guilt I might have had about what I was about to do, evaporated in that moment. They had not only plotted to steal from my present, they had already stolen from my past. This was no longer a defense. It was a counterattack. And I had just found my smoking gun. The confrontation was coming. But it wasn't going to be the one they had planned. It was going to be mine. For the next 2 days, I let them simmer. My phone blew up, of course. First came the confused text from my mother on Saturday morning. "Where did you go? Your note was so strange." Then the worried calls, then the angry voicemails. My father tried a different tactic, sending emails with increasingly urgent subject lines. Family matter, then urgent, call home immediately. I ignored them all. I spent the weekend speaking with my financial advisor, who was appalled and immediately helped me move my investment portfolio to a new institution, severing the last financial link. I had a 90-minute consultation with the attorney, a woman whose voice was as sharp and precise as a scalpel. She walked me through my rights and laid out a strategy. I spent hours documenting everything I could remember, every instance of financial disparity, creating a timeline of their deception. I was no longer a daughter processing a betrayal. I was a prosecutor building a case. By Tuesday evening, I was ready. I had let their panic build to a crescendo. They were off balance, angry, and most importantly, they still thought they were in control. They thought this was about my childish tantrum, my selfishness. They had no idea I was holding a nuclear bomb. I sent a single, simple text to my father. "I will video call at 8 p.m. tonight. Make sure Mom and Leo are there." I didn't ask, I told. At exactly 8 o'clock, I initiated the call from my home office in Brooklyn. I chose the setting deliberately. Behind me were my bookshelves filled with finance textbooks and framed certifications. I was on my home turf. I was in command. Their 3 faces popped up on the screen, a triptych of indignation. They were huddled together on the living room sofa, a united front of parental authority. My father's face was a thundercloud. My mother looked like she was on the verge of tears, her classic manipulation tactic. And Leo just looked annoyed, like I had interrupted his video game. My mother fired the opening salvo, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. "Amelia, what on earth is the meaning of this? Do you have any idea how you embarrassed me? Leaving without a word on my birthday weekend? Our guests arrived for the party, and we had to tell them you had disappeared. We were worried sick." Worried about their social standing, she meant, not about me. I let her finish, my expression unreadable. I kept my face perfectly neutral, a technique I'd perfected in high-stakes negotiations at work. It unnerved people. It made them reveal their hand. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice even and calm. So calm it was chilling. "There was no work emergency. I left because I overheard your conversation with Dad and Leo on Friday night." The silence that followed was more damning than any confession. It was absolute. My father's angry expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of pure shock. My mother's jaw went slack, her eyes darting towards my father in confusion and panic. Leo's smug look vanished, and he suddenly couldn't meet the camera's gaze. They were caught, and they knew it. My father recovered first, falling back on blustering denial. "I don't know what you think you heard, young lady. It was a private conversation about family business." "Was it?" I asked, still in that same quiet tone. Because it sounded a lot like a conspiracy. I believe the topics included Leo's $40,000 gambling debt and a detailed plan to trick me into taking out a loan to pay for it. "Now you listen here," my father boomed, his anger returning as his only defense. "No one was tricking you. We were going to present you with a legitimate business opportunity, a family investment that would have benefited everyone." Leo, seeing an opening, chimed in with a sneer. "Yeah, maybe if you weren't always eavesdropping on people, you wouldn't get the wrong idea, Amelia. It's called privacy." I almost laughed. The sheer audacity. "Interesting," I said, looking directly at my brother through the screen. "That your primary concern is the fact that I overheard your plan, rather than the fact that you were planning to commit fraud against your own sister." I let the word hang in the air. Fraud. My mother started to cry for real this time, her voice rising hysterically. How can you say that? Family helps family. Your brother made a mistake, but you're supposed to be there for him. You've done so well for yourself. You have all this money. It's your duty to help. And there it was, the core of their entire worldview. My success wasn't my own, it was a family asset. My accomplishments were simply a resource for them to liquidate to cover for my brother's failures. The rage that had been simmering for days, the cold, hard rage from the hotel room, began to rise. But I kept it in check. The bomb was not ready to drop yet. First, I had to dismantle their entire argument. Duty? I said, my voice dropping lower. Let's talk about duty. Let's talk about help. When did this family ever help me? When I needed help with college, you told me to take out loans and work 2 jobs. When I graduated with honors, you were too busy taking Leo to a soccer tournament to even show up. When I built a career and a life for myself, despite your complete lack of support, you saw it as an opportunity. A resource to be plundered. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. You ungrateful! I cut him off. My voice was no longer quiet. It was sharp. It was loud. It was the voice of the bulldog. Stop! He stopped. The shock of my interrupting him, of me raising my voice to him for the first time in my life, stunned him into silence. Now, they were all listening. The stage was set. You know what? I said, leaning closer to the camera. Forget the $40,000, forget the drone, forget the business plan. That's just the latest chapter in a very, very long story. I did some digging this weekend. I was looking through some old financial records, and I found something fascinating. I watched their faces. My father's eyes narrowed in suspicion. My mother just looked confused. A name on a document, I continued, drawing out the moment. It read, Amelia College Custodial Trust. Does that ring a bell for either of you? If I had reached through the screen and slapped my father, the effect would have been less dramatic. All the color drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. My mother just shook her head, a confused, pathetic motion. She probably never even knew. It was always his domain. I didn't wait for an answer. I pressed the attack. It was an account you opened when I was 5, I said, my voice dripping with ice. An account you contributed to every single month for 11 years. An account that, by the time I was a teenager, had a balance of almost $18,000. I let the number land. $18,000. It was a fortune. It was the future they had denied me. That's the money, I said, my voice now a low, vicious snarl. That you told me didn't exist. That's the money you stole from me. You drained the entire account in one transaction. And you used it to pay for Leo's 2-week computer camp. The same summer you told me to use my own minimum wage savings to pay for my class trip. Complete and utter silence. There was no defense. There was no denial. There was only the stark, ugly, undeniable truth hanging between us. I had them. The lie they had built my entire life upon had been exposed. The narrative of the struggling family who could only afford to support one child. It was a fiction. The truth was, they were a family that chose to sacrifice one child for the other. I looked at their stunned, horrified faces on my screen. My father, the patriarch, the accountant, looked small, defeated. My mother was staring at him, her mouth agape, the tears forgotten, a look of dawning horror on her face as she realized the depth of the deception. And Leo, he looked utterly bewildered, like a child who had just learned the world wasn't flat. I had won. The war was over in a single devastating salvo. They had come to this call expecting to intimidate and guilt-trip me into submission. They thought they held all the cards. They never even knew I was playing a different game entirely, and I had just played the winning hand. I leaned back in my chair, the silence stretching on. I didn't say another word. I just watched them. I watched their world crumble, and in that moment, I felt nothing but a vast, cold, and immensely satisfying sense of victory. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. On my screen, the three of them were frozen, statues in a museum of familial destruction. The absolute shock on their faces was a sight I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It was my mother who broke first. She turned to my father, her expression a maelstrom of confusion and dawning horror. Her voice was a thin, reedy whisper. "Robert, what is she talking about? A college fund? I don't understand." My father, the confident patriarch, the man who always had a plan, looked completely gutted. He stared at me through the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. He had no defense, no lie, no justification. The paper trail was absolute. I had him, and he knew it. Leo was the one who reacted next, and in a way, his reaction was the most telling. He didn't look at me with anger. He looked at my father with pure, unadulterated betrayal. You had money for her?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "You had $18,000, and you still you made me think." He couldn't even finish the sentence. In that moment, the golden child realized that the pedestal he stood on was built on a foundation of lies and theft. He wasn't special because he was inherently worthy. He was special because they had actively stolen from my future to finance his present. The illusion of his own merit was shattered right before my eyes. And that's when the panic set in. The realization of what this meant began to ripple across their faces. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was evidence. This was a legal and financial time bomb. My mother's confusion morphed into sheer terror. Her eyes widened as she grasped the implications. The $40,000 debt wasn't going to be magically erased. The family business plan was a fantasy. Their safety net, the one they had always taken for granted, me, had just evaporated. "Amelia, honey, this has to be a misunderstanding," she pleaded, her voice choked with tears. "It can't be true. Your father, he would never." But my father found his voice, and it wasn't a voice of remorse. It was a roar of pure, cornered rage. The shock had worn off, replaced by the fury of a king whose authority had been challenged. He pointed a trembling finger at the camera, his face contorted. "That was our money," he bellowed, his voice cracking with the strain. "We earned it! We had every right to decide how to allocate it for the good of this family. We decided your brother needed it more. That's what parents do. They make tough decisions." It was breathtaking. Even now, cornered with irrefutable proof of his theft, he couldn't admit fault. He twisted it into an act of parental sacrifice. He tried to frame his crime as a noble choice. "You have destroyed this family," he screamed, his voice escalating into a frantic tirade. "After everything we've done for you, we gave you a roof over your head, we fed you, and this is how you repay us? By digging up the past and throwing it in our faces? You are a selfish, ungrateful child." The blame shift. It was as predictable as the sunrise. In his mind, the crime wasn't the theft. The crime was my discovery of it. The problem wasn't his actions. The problem was my reaction. My mother, seeing my father's rage, joined the chorus, her tears now a weapon. "How could you do this to us, Amelia?" she sobbed, clutching her chest theatrically. "We love you so much. I have spent my whole life sacrificing for you and your brother. Don't you see you're tearing us apart? Your brother is in trouble. He needs us. He needs you. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive and help us fix this?" Fix this. The words hung in the air. Fix this didn't mean addressing the decades of injustice. It meant making the $40,000 problem go away. It meant me, once again, erasing my own needs to serve theirs. They were trying to leverage my emotions, just as my father had planned. But they didn't realize they were talking to a ghost. The daughter who could be manipulated by those pleas was gone. "This isn't about forgiveness," I said, my voice cutting through their noise like a razor. This is about consequences. My father then tried a new tactic, the threat. You think you're so smart with your lawyers and your bank statements, he spat, his voice laced with venom. You pull a stunt like this, you will be on your own. You hear me? You will have no family. When things go wrong in your life, and they will, don't you dare come crawling back to us. It was meant to be the ultimate threat, banishment, the thing I had feared my entire life. But hearing it now, it had no power. How can you be banished from a place you were never truly welcome? How can you lose a family you never really had? The final, desperate ploy came from my mother. The bargain. Okay, Amelia, okay, she said, trying to sound reasonable, her voice shaky. Let's let's all calm down. We can talk about this. Maybe, maybe we can work something out. A payment plan. We can, we can pay you back for the college fund. Over time. If you'll just help Leo with this current situation. Please, honey. We can make a deal. A deal. After all this, after the lies, the theft, the conspiracy, they thought they could negotiate. They thought my integrity, my future, my self-respect were all commodities to be bartered. They still didn't get it. They still thought they had something I wanted, but I had everything I needed. I had the truth. I had the evidence. And most importantly, I had the moral high ground, a place so foreign to them they couldn't even comprehend its existence. Their panic, their rage, their pathetic attempts at manipulation, it all washed over me. It was just noise. The desperate thrashing of drowning people who refused to admit they were the ones who had steered the ship into the storm. I watched them on the screen, a chaotic whirlwind of blame and fear. My father was yelling about disrespect, my mother was sobbing about her broken heart, and Leo was just sitting there, staring into space, the golden sheen rubbed off him for good. They weren't a family in crisis. There were 3 individuals in a foxhole, each one trying to push the others into the line of fire. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that walking away was not an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. The only act of true self-love I had ever allowed myself to commit. They hadn't just given me a reason to leave. They had given me a mandate. I let their chaotic symphony of panic and blame play out for another 30 seconds. I watched as my mother turned on my father, her sobs turning into accusations. I watched as my father deflected, pointing the finger back at Leo's irresponsibility. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, a twisted, ugly ballet of dysfunction. And I felt nothing. The emotional part of my brain had simply shut down, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of a surgeon about to make a final, clean incision. I held up my hand. I didn't say anything. I just held up my hand, a simple gesture of finality, and amazingly they fell silent. All 3 of them stopped, their faces tear-streaked and desperate, and looked at me. I had their complete and undivided attention, perhaps for the first time in my entire life. I'm going to say this once, I said, my voice devoid of any heat or anger. It was the voice I used with underperforming analysts. It was the voice of calm, indisputable authority. So I suggest you listen very carefully. The $40,000 is Leo's problem, not mine. The fake family business is a fantasy. It will never happen. My credit is frozen. My assets are secured. My lawyer has been briefed. If you attempt to access my finances, use my identity, or contact me in any way that could be perceived as harassment, I will pursue every available legal remedy. That is not a threat. That is a statement of fact. I let that sink in. I could see the gears turning in my father's head as he processed the words. Frozen, secured, lawyer. These were concepts he understood. This was a language he respected far more than the language of a daughter's pain. As for the $18,000 you stole from my college fund, I continued, my gaze fixed on him. Consider it the price of my freedom. It's the severance package I am paying myself for 28 years of service as this family's scapegoat and backup plan. We are even. My mother started to whisper my name. Amelia, please. I cut her off, my voice softening just a fraction, but not with warmth, with pity. Mom, I am not your emotional support animal. I am not responsible for your happiness, or for fixing your marriage, or for cleaning up the messes your son creates. That is not my job. It never was. And then, I looked at all three of them, one last time. This conversation is over. Our relationship, whatever it was, is over. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not email me. Do not have other family members contact me on your behalf. We are done. For the first time in her life, my mother had no words. My father looked defeated, and Leo just looked lost. I moved my cursor over the bright red end call button. I held it there for a second, a final silent period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. And then I clicked. The screen went black. The silence in my apartment was absolute. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light, like a massive, crushing weight I had been carrying on my shoulders my entire life had just been lifted. The constant grinding effort of trying to earn their love, of trying to be good enough, of contorting myself into a shape they might finally approve of. It was over. I had finally, truly, stopped trying. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I wasn't waiting for their judgment. I had chosen myself. I had chosen my own peace over their chaos. It was a monumental moment. If you support this powerful decision, this act of ultimate self-preservation, show some love in the comments. Drop a flexed bicep emoji down below to give her some strength for the journey ahead. My finger hovered over the contact info on my phone. My father's name, my mother's, my brother's. One by one, I tapped block this caller. Then I went to my social media accounts and did the same. With each click, the feeling of lightness grew. It was a digital exorcism. I was purging their influence from my life, one bite at a time. The silence that followed felt different. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of possibility. Full of peace. But it was also lonely. The reality of what I had just done began to sink in. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life. I had no family. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. And then my phone buzzed. For a heart-stopping second, I thought one of them had somehow gotten through. But it wasn't them. It was a text from my best friend from college, Sarah. The one person who had witnessed the tail end of my family's dysfunction up close. The one who had seen me come back to the dorms, exhausted and hollow-eyed after a weekend visit home. The text was simple. Hey, just saw your LinkedIn update about your promotion. Dude, project manager, that's amazing. We need to celebrate. You okay? You've been quiet lately. And in that moment, the tears I had refused to shed finally came. Not tears of sadness for the family I had lost, but tears of overwhelming gratitude for the family I had chosen. I picked up the phone and called her. I told her everything. The drone, the $40,000 debt, the overheard conversation, and the college fund. I laid it all bare, the ugly, painful truth. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. When I was done, there was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. And then she said the 6 words that healed a part of me I didn't even know was broken. She said, "Good for you. You're finally free." She didn't question my decision. She didn't tell me I was being too harsh. She didn't say, "But they're your family." She just understood. She celebrated my escape. After we hung up, I knew there were 2 more calls I had to make. They were harder. I sent a short, carefully worded email to my maternal grandmother and to my Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister. They were the 2 relatives who had always shown me a quiet, consistent kindness. They had sent me $20 bills and birthday cards in college. They had always asked about my life and actually listened to the answer. I didn't give them all the sordid details. I just told them that a serious and long-standing family issue had come to a head, and for the sake of my own well-being, I had made the difficult decision to step away from my parents and my brother for the foreseeable future. I told them I loved them, and that my decision had nothing to do with them, and that I hoped we could maintain our relationship. I hit send, my heart pounding. This was the real test. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my aunt. "I got your email," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm not going to ask for details. That's your story to tell. I just want you to know one thing. We see you, Amelia. We've always seen you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." That was it. That was the validation I had been craving my entire life. And it hadn't come from the people who were supposed to give it. It came from the people who gave it freely, without condition. In the rubble of my old life, I was starting to see the foundations of a new one. A life built not on obligation or biology, but on mutual respect and genuine love. It was a family of my own making, and it was so much stronger than the one I had left behind. 3 years have passed since that final video call. 3 years of profound, deafening, and ultimately, blissful silence. About 6 months after what I now call my Independence Day, my company offered me a chance to relocate, to help open their new West Coast office. I jumped at the opportunity. I sold my condo in Brooklyn for a tidy profit and moved to San Francisco. Leaving New York felt like shedding the last layer of my old skin. San Francisco was a clean slate, a new city, a new life, an ocean between me and the ruins of my past. My life now is calm. It's a word I never thought I'd use to describe myself. I was promoted to director last year. I have a beautiful apartment that overlooks the bay. I've made friends, real friends, who value me for my sarcastic sense of humor and my encyclopedic knowledge of bad action movies, not for what I can do for them. I'm in a healthy relationship with a man who sees me as an equal partner, not a resource. My life is full. It's a life I built, piece by piece on my own terms. I still hear things, of course. My Aunt Linda keeps me updated in small, carefully chosen doses. The fallout for my former family was swift and brutal. With their primary financial backup plan gone, they had to face the consequences of their choices for the first time. The $40,000 debt didn't just disappear. My parents, desperate to avoid the social shame of their son declaring bankruptcy, did the one thing they swore they would never do. They cashed out a huge portion of my father's 401k to pay it off. The tax penalties alone were devastating, wiping out nearly a third of their retirement savings overnight. My father, the proud patriarch, had to take on a second job at age 62, working weekend shifts at Home Depot, stocking shelves. My mother sold off most of her jewelry. The designer handbag I left on the dresser was one of the first things to go. And Leo, without the safety net, he was finally forced to grow up. He had to move out, get a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and now works 2 low-wage jobs to make ends meet. According to my aunt, for the first time in his life, he understands the meaning of the word budget. There's a part of me that feels a small, cold satisfaction in that. But mostly, I just feel a quiet sense of inevitability. Gravity always wins. Consequences are a force of nature. Then, about a month ago, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. It just said, "I'm sorry." It was from Leo. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. He told me he'd been in therapy for the past year, dealing with what he called his addiction to entitlement. He said being forced to support himself was the hardest and best thing that had ever happened to him. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for anything. He just apologized. For the $40,000, for the drone, for the years of taking his privilege for granted. He apologized for not being a brother. I sat on that email for a week. I talked it over with my therapist, and then I wrote back a short, simple reply. "Thank you for the apology. I'm glad to hear you're getting help. I wish you well. That was it. No offer of reconciliation. No opening the door to the past. It was an acknowledgement, not an invitation. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. Maybe someday I'll get there. But trust? Trust is earned. And they had spent a lifetime proving they were unworthy of it. I control the terms of engagement now. And for now, the terms are silence. Sometimes when I'm standing by my window, watching the fog roll in over the Golden Gate Bridge, I think about the biggest lesson I've learned. Your worth is not determined by your family's inability to see it. It's something you build yourself, brick by painful brick. Financial independence isn't just about money, it's about freedom. The freedom to walk away from toxic situations without looking back. And I've learned that the family you choose, the friends who show up, who listen, who celebrate your freedom, is infinitely more valuable than the family you're born into. Sometimes, losing the family that was never truly yours is the only way to find the peace you truly deserve. And that brings me to you. Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand with family members who refuse to respect you? How did you navigate those painful, necessary conversations? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can learn from each other. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories about finding your voice, and share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Thank you for listening.